menopause. I'm 50 now, almost in menopause, and like it's legit. It's like it's crazy making. Your mind goes crazy. Like I feel like relationships can be sabotaged. People, it's big time stuff.
I had a patient say to me recently, and it was just kind of nailed it, where I can see why many women and my friends get divorced when they're in menopause, in perimenopause and menopause. And I was like, oh, I can see how, yeah, because very often it's the mood things that go undiagnosed and unrecognized because you just feel that way. So that's how you feel. And I've had women say to me, wait, this is what anxiety is, or wait, this is what depression is, because I never understood what people were talking about until now. And it's like, yes, that can happen. You can all of a sudden, your whole life, you're just cruising along, you're pretty mentally, like, you get a little low, a little high, that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden you have this pervasive thought pattern of stress, and you're worried about every catastrophe about to happen. And that's by definition anxiety. It's like unreasonable worries, and you just don't know why. And so of course you're going to start looking around at the people in your life and start sort of having relationship issues. And one of the hard things is that you never know, like, is this me? Is this hormone changes? Is this actually happening? And it's hard because sometimes sleep is affected too with hot flashes. And sometimes people are getting, one of the other things that happens, which I know Hillary always teaches people about, is they'll get frozen shoulder or shoulder pain and or neck pain. Shoulder pain is really, we call it pathognomonic. Like it really talks about estrogen to us when we sort of start talking to people. But there can be all kinds of things, migraines, headaches you've never had before. There can be so many different symptoms that interrupt your sleep and your ability to actually rest and recoup, that all of these confounding factors makes it so these hormone fluctuations are just making us unstable. So it's like we can't necessarily trust, like, is that decision what I normally would do, or is that because I haven't slept for 3 days? Or, it's hard to know and to like trust your own instincts, and I talk to people about this. That's why I'm sort of saying it. Maybe those things aren't happening to you if you're listening today, but it is happening to some women, and they're sort of voicing it in our offices to us. And so I think that's a really nice thing to sort of recognize, is like, hey, maybe there's something I can do about these hormone fluctuations and I can do to support my hormone health. And so Hillary and I next week are starting a hormone detox, which is not a hardcore
On
detox.
the 21st.
Yes.
Too.
I never know how to use the word next in our English system, as you know. But anyway, coming up soon. And one of the great things about it is it's very gentle in teaching your body how to increase the right kinds of fiber, how to support your microbiome, how to eat differently and choose maybe just different options that might support us to get us a better night's sleep and support maybe hormone creation and our stress systems and that kind of thing. So that is going to be really helpful for you all listening, because it's basic things we can do in our daily lives. We like to make things simple. We don't want to be like, everyone has to do this or everyone has to do that. It's like, let's teach people some options and have them try them and see if they feel better, and things you can do easily in your life. So that's coming up on the 21st. Thank you, Hillary.
And yeah, I just think that it's a real wave. We ride waves, and there no many months are like, the months aren't the same, and it's hard, like Kara said, to have awareness about what's actually happening. Like I can even know, oh my gosh, I'm getting my period, and I can warn the people around me I'm getting my period, and yet I can still have emotional dysregulation that's just not the same as how I am when I'm in the middle of my cycle. So, and it's just getting kind of more potent. It's sort of like the fireworks show where it's like the big finish. It feels like everything becomes more so right before menopause. So we just have to kind of watch it and support each other through it. And the great news is like, at least there's communication, but I do think there's a disconnect with the men that we live with, or if you live with a man, or if you're in relationship with a man, I think it's confuses them in general, and it's understandable. It's like there's a lot of changes going on. So it's where it's good to be with women, right? And get support and know that we're all good. So we do you want to just talk a little bit about testosterone? One of the things that we hasn't come up yet, we've talked a lot about progesterone, did a deep dive yesterday about estrogen. Testosterone is an incredibly important hormone that's definitely under spoken about in perimenopause and menopause. Testosterone actually like ounce for ounce is the most potent hormone that women have. Women have it consistently across their lives. Some of us make more of it than others, and a lot of it has to do with our detox pathways, the way in which we kind of deal with our hormones downstream. And so some of us have too much testosterone in our reproductive life. That's called women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Some have very low testosterone all the way across the board. Many of them will show up looking more estrogen dominant and could use testosterone support. So it's one of those that like, I'd say we never even really learned much about testosterone outside of polycystic ovarian syndrome for women. And it's a really important thing for our bone health, our musculoskeletal system, our brain health, decision making, our resilience. And again, it's mostly made by ovary and it's part of a detox pathway for, like I said, so Kara and I, when we did our genetic test, you can really see that I detox estrogen through testosterone pathways. She has much more estrogen dominance going around. So some of this stuff can just be seen by in your genetic pathways, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so we'll start with like the same molecule, and then I'll take it to estrogen, you'll take it to testosterone. So that's just like a big difference.
Big difference. And like what testosterone does for women in general is it works along with adrenal cortisol for your like get up and go and like do things. It is responsible for arousal and female arousal. So one of the things that definitely happens for women, many women in perimenopause and menopause, is that they lose their sex drive, they lose their arousal. I'll have many patients say that they're in good relationships, but they would rather not have sex again, or that's fine. They could do it maybe once a week. They could do it once a month. They're sort of detached. They don't have sexual desire or dreams or thoughts. And it's not until we have the conversation where I'm sort of like shining a light on it going, is that how you used to be? Or is that always how you were? And it's again one of those things that sometimes we don't think about. And then when somebody calls your attention to it, it's like, oh, that actually is a major change. One of the only things that really treats sexual desire is testosterone and arousal. So if you're having that issue, often if we're balancing estrogen and progesterone, women will become, if they're having any vaginal dryness or pain, there is also this thing where if their estrogen's quite low, they can feel like sex hurts. And like, obviously, there's nothing that's going to kill arousal more than like painful sex. I've had women describe it as like glass, like it feels like broken glass. Like, obviously, she's not thinking about sex if it feels like broken glass when she's having it. So there's all things kind of need to be warmed up and massaged in estrogen and progesterone, but testosterone's a major player for arousal issues. If there's depression, if there's this can't really make a decision, like I just can't decide. I find myself not being able to decide things. And muscle, if you're like, I'm working out, I'm weightlifting, I'm doing all the things, and I feel just like this like flabby mess, and I don't have good arousal, well, you might have really, really low testosterone. So
And we're going to go through some things that could potentially raise that testosterone where we're in the detox. Like there are things we can do to push pathways toward testosterone. But Hillary, you're talking about this and women are listening and they're thinking, should I be put on testosterone? Because that's weird. Because like I've been on HRT for a long time, hormone replacement therapy. No one's ever talked to me about testosterone. So as you were talking, I was thinking, I wonder what percentage of women are actually put on testosterone. It has to be so small, but we always have this conversation. But I think it's not part of the regular prescription. And I think it's really missing for women, especially who have a family history or a strong um, potential risk of losing bone mass and have maybe osteopenia or their T-score is changing. So I think that's a really important thing for people to start thinking about, like, hey, I could actually be supplementing with that. Like I could add that into my hormone prescription. What do you think about that?
Well, so I think that when I'm writing for hormone replacement therapy, I'd say that um 70% of my patients are on testosterone.
Is
I'm
highly
using,
unusual. That's that's not your regular prescriber. That's highly unusual. But yeah, because you're thinking about this.
well, it is very common in prescribers that understand about hormones and longevity. So like
Very
you're
few of
living
them.
in a part of the country where people are they're not even getting it done with the estrogen. It's really common, I'd say, with naturopathic experts in hormones and any kind of doctor that's looking at longevity or any doctor that's done a deep dive. Yeah, my last
Not just a regular OB though. That's a little
yeah,
harder.
but my OB is working hard on it. My last kind exam was hilarious. I won't say my doctor's name, but she's an incredible surgeon. I love her. She's been my doctor. She did 2 C-sections for me. But my last gyne exam, the whole thing was like, how do I write prescriptions for testosterone again? What am I supposed to do? What's in milligrams? Like, how are you doing it? Like the whole thing, it was hysterical. I was like, okay, I'll just write it down for you and we'll get it sorted. So it's most women now, I'd say one of the big things that people hear about out in the world and what a lot of women get is they get testosterone pellets inserted. That's a thing. It's interesting. I mean, that's definitely not my favorite way approach. I feel like any kind of inserted hormone, we can't really manipulate or maneuver or shift. And those women experience extraordinarily high levels of testosterone. I was just having a conversation with a functional doctor who was against it, and then she started using it in patients and felt like it was actually not as bad as she thought it was. So I'm open to learning a little bit more, but in general, I like using steady Eddie doses of testosterone. Generally, obviously, never enough where a woman's getting chin hair or her voice is deepening.
I
There's
cannot do that.
very safe range. And again, understanding my patient's detox pathways makes a big difference
Big.
around testosterone. So if you're my patient and you're saying, you've never done that with me, then well, we get
There's
to do
a
that
reason
soon.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not everybody needs it. And I definitely am testing it. Testosterone actually is best test by blood. So there's a free and a total testosterone that you can ask your doctor to check. Many doctors, if they're not looking for it, it means that they're not prescribing it. So you want to find a doctor that does. There's a question here about men's testosterone.
Can I read the question? It's like, I think other women are going to relate to this question. So it says, does testosterone for men go up with age? Or does it just seem like my husband has more sex drive because I have less? I mean, I think a lot of people might relate to that.
So men go through a major testosterone change. It's later. It's usually, depending on a lot of factors, obviously 52, 54, 56, 58. If your guy had a lot of testosterone to start with, then he's going to be on the later side. If he was kind of a lower T guy, not as much of a sex drive, not as much um just lower testosterone in general, not as beefy, not as some of the guys that are like big hairy beards, big beefy men, they do actually have more testosterone than some of the guys that are like leaner type engineering can't grow a beard. Okay, so like men have a lot of variation in their hormone production as well, and their stress hormones deeply impact them. So their drops happen later than ours. Ours will happen. Some of it is like if you have later birth, if you had kids in your 40s, you might just your testosterone could kind of not ever really come back quite the same because it was such a drama having babies and making babies. It's a big thing that we do. Whereas they're just sort of like steady Eddie through it, right? So yes, you will notice typically, especially if you're in around 47, 48, 49, 50, and the women are just like, I'm really waning, and they're still going strong. That's definitely happening.
I want to bring this next thing up because a number of people have written in with this question and people are asking live about, and by the way, you can email questions to hello@cultivatefoundations.com. And we really do try to address these for you. So we used to think this was a really tight window. You know, you went into menopause, that means like a year of no period. And there was a certain amount of time before you could that you'd had to start hormones. And it was dangerous. And we would never start hormones in someone if they've been in menopause for a certain amount of time. Now, that research has changed the way we think about it and the timeline's a little bit out. And so one of the people who wrote in was saying, you know, I've been in menopause for 15 plus years. Like, would this be an option for me? And then somebody else is just writing like, is it ever too late in age? So what are the rules currently based on research and based on guidelines that women can start HRT?
So, in general, like if we were going to take a board exam test on it now, it would say that if a woman's been in menopause, which is defined by 1 full year having not had a period, 10 years from that 1 year date, she's no longer a candidate for hormone replacement therapy. So, that's the way that it's sort of been written into stone.
Mhm.
Many OBs won't even consider it up into the years because again, they didn't know that much about hormones. And again, really up until 2 years ago, generally medical doctors were like, it's a no unless you really need it. Some doctors were into hormones, some knew nothing about it, and hormones were hadn't it hadn't been uncovered that the study was really bad and that we maybe missed the mark and there was this big hormone revolution happening. So now what's going on is there's just fast and furious amounts of research happening. There was always research happening on hormones, but looking at the way they're doing it in other countries and figuring stuff out and trying to weigh the risk benefits. So it's really tricky when the FDA is making kind of prescription rules for drugs. They're looking at it's not an individualized process, obviously. So if we have people who are in their 8th year and they have not been on hormones and they're take great good care, their labs look great, their blood looks thin, they're not at stroke risk, they're not at cardiovascular risk, because some of the risks of starting much later if you haven't had estrogen is that estrogen can be clotty, and so it can increase the risk of heart disease or stroke. And so they think that the risks potentially outweigh the benefits. That said, the benefits haven't been fully flushed out or understood in the research. So I think this is going to be a really changing field. And so if you look at somebody that's high cardiovascular risk, high stroke, they have type 2 diabetes, they haven't been on hormones for 9 years, they have some obesity or central obesity, and they're a smoker, like they should never be put on estrogen. But if you have somebody that's not those things and taking good care and don't have family history and have a major history of osteoporosis or have a major history of dementia or in their family, or they have the ApoE gene that's a predisposition to dementia, well, that like maybe should be a different conversation. So
Mhm.
I think that's kind of what's happening, and some doctors are really stepping out now and saying, it just, if I'm treating the brain, and estrogen is a major medicine for the brain, then that rule is going to be undercut because I'm caring for the brain more than anything else. So it's again very individualized as things
Right.
go.
And it's a decision made with your doctor, and hopefully you have one like Hillary who knows so much about it. Um, and I want to ask this one last question before we wrap it up about, you know, when you sit down with women and have this conversation, because I think it's really interesting that we actually do sit with individual women, and we've been doing this for years, and they come tell us, okay, I went to the OB, this is what they said. I went to this person, this is what they said. You know, what are still some of the misconceptions that, and I know they drive you bonkers. You know what I mean? Where you're like, but that's not actually true. Like, what are some of the things that maybe some of the women listening might hear from their doctors, even who just aren't up to date on the latest on this? Or what are
That
some of the things you
hormones
want
have
them
an
to know?
expiration, so that's still one that hormones have an expiration. You could be on this now for symptoms, but you should be off by the time you're 60. That's still happening. Migraine, there's a question here about migraine. What about migraines? My
That's a
OB-GYN, yeah.
stroke risk. So,
That is very dependent on the type of migraine, and that is a lot changed in medicine. Many doctors are doing things differently. If you have imaging that's clear, you don't have vascular changes, the migraine in and of itself for bioidentical hormones is not necessarily an absolute no. So that's something to kind of think a little bit more about. Um, that those risk people are thinking differently a little bit about those risk factors now. And so what this is all about is like looking at a woman's individual genetics, at her risks, at her family history, at what she's had or hasn't had. Women, the populations I'd say that are going that where it's going to change in the future is it's been very shut down for people with estrogen or progesterone sensitive cancers, which makes sense. But as we learn more about cancer and hormones, I think that that will be a changing, that won't be so black and white.
mhm.
Um, and also the same is that I'd say that some women are one told the myth that they can't be on hormones until they're in menopause. That's definitely false. We're using estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone all before a woman's officially in menopause for the right women, for women who need it. Um, and I think that the other one is that hormones e equal cancers. That was sort of something that I think a lot of people came with, and it's been funny to be an alternative doctor and say, I just want you to know that like all the natural doctors or all the alternative doctors are on hormones, and my patients are like, wait, what? It's almost like a paradigm shift. They were kind of like hormones are bad, because the maybe real natural minded people didn't want to be on the pill or something. So then it's like it was a big shift to hear like all the natural doctors have been rubbing themselves with creams and whatever they could get
Yeah.
all through the dark days of the 90s and 2000s. Like, if you meet anybody in the longevity space, MD, naturopathic doctor, DO, they all stayed on their hormones, right?
Yeah.
So like it's just been this paradigm shift
Mhm.
that the hormones that we make are not poisons. They are actually protective for us and our organs along the way when used properly and detoxed well.
And that's our lifestyle choices, all the things we do throughout our days determines part of this risk. So that's what we're going to really do in this detox is go through like, okay, you think you have this, how about this? Let's try this. Let's get the pathways going. And let's see what we can do with the supportive, easy things, whether you're on hormones or off hormones right now. There's a lot we can do just by daily decisions we make.
Yeah, so if you're
With
one of
education.
our patients and you're like, wow, I don't know about my detox hormones or so, it's just too much to cover in all the visits. So that's why Karen and I create these extra programs. So if you're our patient and you're on hormones, like get in the detox so we can cover this with you in a very affordable way. And if you're not our patient and you want to learn more about hormones and hormone balance, this is when you're going to get to spend a lot more time deep
And
diving.
the first meeting, people are asking right now, the first meeting is going through the actual pathway. So how I said, you give us the same molecule, Hillary goes to testosterone, I go to estrogen. We're going to show you all that and organize all that for you and let you know how to try and shift those things with natural things. And there is a lot we know about doing that. And sometimes that works really beautifully for people. So you might see even within the 10 days, like I'm feeling a lot better and I'm noticing this stuff is actually working. So that's our whole goal. So I am looking forward to seeing you all there. I know a lot of these names, and I'm going to say most of you are already all signed up, which is really exciting and fun. So we will see you. Is this where I can use next week? No, 2 weeks.
Yay. But
Bye.
I'll be tomorrow wrapping this 5 days up. So see you then. Bye, everybody.